Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Violent crimes were very much in the news this week, and so were legal questions raised by them, such as the use of deadly force, determining who is low risk and who is not, and how to deal with possible mental health issues. We will search for answers as well as discussing the cost of rentals versus the level of wages. The City Council consults about consultants. Our Future Watch segment looks at the readiness of the new VA hospital, and the Pelicans get lucky. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Dave Cohen, news director, WWL Radio. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Jessica Williams, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go over it today first because there was just this series of shootings in Metairie, for starters, and then, of course, there was a drugstore robbery in New Orleans, but let's start with Metairie first. So-called spree shooter, and then also some other shootings at a playground, just not related to the spree shooting.
Yeah, the spree shooting is obviously the one that has been the most concerning and really fascinatingly compelling, and how well the JPSO was able to quickly investigate and solve this case due to some luck and due to a lot of investment.
And thank goodness
in technology and good detectives. So we first became aware of something on Tuesday when we found out that Monday night there had been a late night shooting on West Metairie Avenue, and police found a dead man in the street and had absolutely nothing to go on. Witnesses described seeing a light-colored SUV leaving the scene. That was absolutely all they had. They began to canvass the scene, and we did not know this immediately, but on the scene, they very fortunately found a cell phone. It was in the grass. It was next to the drainage canal. There was no explanation for why it was there. They didn't know if it was related to the crime or not, but they took that as evidence just to see what it was, and brought it back to the Jefferson Parish Digital Forensic Crime Lab, the only one in the region. Thank God they had this Digital Forensic Crime Lab, because at any other agency they would have had to bag this evidence and send it off somewhere to get it analyzed. It could take days, maybe even weeks before someone receives it. They were able to break the phone, get into it, crack its code, and find out who owned that phone. While they were doing that, shortly after they had identified who owned the phone, the second murder happens on West Metairie Avenue, where 2 people are shot and killed. At this point, you know, the antennas are all up. You know something's not right here. This is a ridiculously quiet neighborhood. There's nothing there but homes and churches. Yeah. And there's never any crime in that neighborhood. You know, we hear that all the time when we cover crime stories, but this really is one of those crazy quiet neighborhoods where nothing ever happens. So it was evident something was going on. Moments later, they were able to, because they had undercover detectives on the house, watching the house of the owner of the phone, he drives up. They're able to run his license plate on his light-colored SUV, and because they have license plate readers all over Jefferson Parish, they're able to place him at the scene of both the murders on West Metairie Avenue. Now they've got what they need to get a search warrant. They call in the SWAT team. They go in. They find the gun in his dirty clothes hamper. They match the ballistics to the single murder and the double murder, and since have linked that same gun to 2 shootings on the I-10, a murder in New Orleans East, and another shooting in New Orleans.
That's just really amazing. It was really just amazing to everybody. Certainly, you know, people who live in that area is totally astounding. What the question I had regarding this young man who is charged with these shootings and these killings, he had had protective custody orders taken out on him in December and in April, yet he still had possession of a gun. How does that happen?
According to the sheriff, 22-year-old Sean Barrett, even though he had been committed by a doctor to a hold twice and was in for mental health assessment because he was deemed a danger to himself or others, the sheriff said that did not preclude him from legally owning a firearm. And he has no prior arrests, no prior criminal background. So the sheriff said, as far as they could tell, he legally could possess this gun. Now, we have not heard yet how he came into ownership of the gun or possession of the gun. If it belonged to somebody else, if he purchased it, we don't know yet. The investigators have not released that information yet. But we know he had it, and in one of those incidents, he had shot himself in the hand. But apparently without a court order to take a gun away from him, and there was not one, even though he shot himself in the hand and was committed as a result of that incident, that did not preclude him from still having access to and possessing a firearm.
Having access to, we don't know if he was actually the owner of that gun
We
yet,
don't know
right?
yet. That's something they have not yet released. But, you know, honestly, this is one of those stories where, as a reporter, you look at it and go, my God, the body count could have piled up so much.
Yeah.
He was cell phone.
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to who he shot or why. We know that according to police, he allegedly shot up a car on the I-10 at the Loyola exit. Hours later, he went to New Orleans and shot and killed a man. Then that was on June 5th and June 6th. On June 17th, he allegedly shot up another car on I-10 at Bonneville. Hours later, he went and committed the murder on West Metairie, the first one. The next day, 2 more. And you just wonder if they didn't find that phone at the scene, if they didn't have that forensic crime lab, if they didn't have those license plate reader cameras, if they didn't have all of these options available to them and the detectives who know how to use all of this technology, would he still be out there just randomly picking people off? And
once again, this is all allegedly, as you said, with all of these different instances. Okay, so another shooting that happened, and not related at all to the spree shootings in Jefferson Parish, was near a playground, just like a day or two after.
Correct. South Causeway Boulevard in Shrewsbury. It's between Airline and Jeff Highway off of Causeway. Playground, 3 men had gone to play basketball. They were shooting hoops inside of the gymnasium at the playground. One of them happened to be a standout football player at Grambling. At 9 o'clock, the gym closed. They come outside. Minutes later, police say a car pulled up and shot all 3 men. The younger brother of the Grambling football player died at the scene. The 2 other men were injured. Thus far, police have not given us any more information. They don't have suspect information they've released yet at this time, and that one remains an open case.
Violent week in Jefferson Parish. Let's quickly now take a look at New Orleans, because it started with a violent act on Britannia at a drugstore there, in CVS, and officer shot, 2 suspects wounded.
Yeah, June 17th, earlier this week, Monday, police say that they got a call to an armed robbery in progress at the CVS on Britannia Uptown. 3 police officers respond to the scene. They said as they got there, they could see 2 suspects wearing gloves, armed with guns, wearing hoods, coming toward the exit. They ordered them to stop. They say that both men started shooting at them. One officer was hit in the shoulder. There was then the suspects retreat back into the CVS. The police retreated. Again, there's another exchange of gunfire, and both suspects are shot.
Just incredible. Also, this is happening in the middle of a neighborhood that's full of people walking and
like
riding bikes.
Either.
Right.
And it's just really
and
incredible.
They said they'd gone in there to steal mostly narcotics. Yeah. They were bagging drugs in the CVS.
And there have been some reports that these 2 individuals, not from here, perhaps part of an Indianapolis-related gang. So let me get you to quickly now touch on what happened in court. After these individuals are taken to court, they are given a very low number in risk assessment.
Yeah.
For this crime.
Both in the city and statewide, there's been a lot of effort, nationally too, for prison reform. There's been a lot of concern that far too many suspects sit in jail far too long who are unable to bond out because their bond is set too high or they're considered too high a risk, whatever the case. So part of that prison reform effort has been to find ways to release more suspects prior to their trials. In Orleans Parish, they rank all arrestees on a 1 to 5 scale of their danger. Both of the suspects who allegedly shot the police officer and shot at all 3 police officers and who were shot in this armed robbery were ranked a 1 out of 5.
And is that just because they didn't have a prior record of these types of offenses?
They look at a number of factors: any prior misdemeanors, any prior felony convictions, currently or having recently served time in jail, and if they've ever failed to appear for a court hearing.
Well, I mean, that's
they both scored perfectly. One of them had a previous misdemeanor. But
even though these charges were attempted murder, 3 charges each of attempted murder of a police officer and everything else that occurred.
But the judges did not set bail based on that.
The magistrate did not.
Did not pay attention to that, but it raises questions about it.
If they post their more than $1 million bail, both of them, because they were rated a 1, will not be monitored. There'll be no ankle bracelets, no checking in with officers, nothing. They will be allowed to freely go wherever they want if they make bail.
All right, Dave. Well, that's quite a way to start our show. Wrap up of really what's been a turbulent week. All right, Dave, thanks a lot. Errol, over to you. One other really tragic thing happened this week, and tragic auto accident.
Traffic accidents aren't usually the sort of thing we can talk about on these shows. I mean, it's horrible they are, they're tragic. But the one this week was so gut-wrenching. I think there should be some acknowledgement of it. And this was the one last Sunday night where 3 men were on the West Bank Expressway, and they were trying to help a vehicle that had broken down, and they were trying to move it. And then someone else comes by, a driver who's been described by the police as being impaired, and drives into them, knocks all 3 of them off the expressway, and they're all killed. And just what a terrible thing about 3 men just stopping and trying to do good things. And just what this brings to mind is that this is the second time this year that there's probably more, but it would come to the mind immediately, where there was a high-profile incident where people were killed by someone who was impaired, and then the other one was that night of the Endymion, where 2 people who were on bicycles. So that's 5 people that we know of right there. And I'm just mentioning because I don't know if people who've been drinking or have some other kind of impairment when they drive, if that's not a deeper issue than we think it is, but it's obviously something that we're seeing the impact of it, and I just want to draw attention to it.
Yeah, yet another family grieving, 3 families grieving. So, all right, we're going to go over to Jessica now and talk about government policy, basically.
Something
a little bit
somber,
different, but still, two issues here. First, we're going to go to a report came out about rentals in New Orleans as compared to wages, and they're just not keeping up.
They're just not. You would need about to earn about $19 an hour to be able to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the city. And the study also showed that the average renter's wage in New Orleans is about $3 under that. And we looked at about 4 years of reports, and every year, the actual wage that people were earning was far less than the amount that they actually needed to be able to afford a 2-bedroom. And what these reports usually are used for is when city officials sit down and decide, what sort of subsidies should we offer for people who need affordable housing? What sort of programs should we offer for long-time homeowners looking to get a break on their property taxes, or for renters who can't afford to live in centrally located areas in the city? They look at these reports, they look at analysis of the market, and they really use them to come up with solutions to those problems, which we've seen. It doesn't seem as though the affordable housing shortage in New Orleans is showing any signs of abating, and we've seen it prominently in the last 8 years or so, but it doesn't seem as though it's slowing down, even despite city efforts.
Some legislation that the city pushed, that the mayor pushed, was passed to perhaps reduce property taxes or freeze property taxes for some property owners in relation to this need for lower rents.
It was, and we'll be getting more information about that as the city council really has a chance to vet it, as actual regulations are drawn. Who would qualify? Right. Would it be folks that make, under $40,000 a year? Could it be folks that make a little bit more than that? Could it be first-time home buyers in addition to long-time home buyers? Do we want to reward small developers to build more of these affordable housing projects that are typically very hard to finance? All of these things are questions that the city council and the mayor's office will be working out over the course of the next few months in preparation for a ballot question on this matter to voters on October 12th.
Okay.
How do we compare, to other cities, San Francisco, New York, Boston, Washington, in terms of the affordability of housing close to the work sites, too?
We're cheaper in terms of how much it costs to live here, but compared to Louisiana, we're among the highest region in terms of the amount that you need to earn in order to be able to afford to live comfortably. But usually New Orleans is a little bit cheaper than other places. When I looked at the report and when I saw overtime, I saw, wages needed of $25 an hour, $30 an hour in other major cities.
If you live just a little farther out.
Gets a little bit. Okay, quickly, I want you to touch on also, council is now looking to have in-house their utility consultants, or really utility employees. Essentially, they've been hiring consultants to the tune of $7 million a year. They're looking to change that.
They are looking to change that, and this would be a significant investment in an in-house office that's really been disinvested in favor of hiring outside consultants who, dating back all the way to the 1980s, were seen as a way for the city to fully embrace its role as regulator of Energy New Orleans, which is a unique role for a city, particularly in a state where there already is a state regulatory body, that being the Louisiana Public Service Commission that regulates the utility usually. And what this would essentially do, the council is hoping to expand the current staff, which is now 5, all the way to 10. And then once the term is up, when the consultants' contracts go to a period where they're ready to be rebid, then the council will be able to decide, well, do we want to expand our in-house office even further? Do we want to have, our own lawyers represent us in front of the Federal Regulatory Commission when we have these big major energy cases, or do we want to continue to rely on outside consultants? This was something that the Office of Inspector General recommended back in 2015 as a best practice. It is far cheaper to hire internal city employees than it is to pay $600 an hour to outside consultants at law firms. But the other side of this is that these consultants have had a good track record as far as litigation goes, and as far as getting results for the city of New Orleans, particularly in cases which we've seen, like with the energy actors, and with the
So we'll see where this goes then.
We'll see where it goes. It's still at the beginning stages.
Development stages. Okay, thanks a lot, Jessica. Okay, Dawn, you, VA, we're quickly running out of time in this show, so.
I'll try to talk fast. The Southeast Louisiana Veterans Health Care System Veterans Medical Center, which is the very short name for the VA hospital.
VA, yes, okay, but you got it all in.
You did.
Opened officially in November of 2016. It really is up and running in full with no more construction. They have seen 3,000 surgeries in the time they've been open, 600,000 plus visits in that amount of time. The one thing the director told me is it's not like they picked up a hospital and moved it and could just restart with everything they had. We went for 12 years without a VA hospital in the city of New Orleans. So the complexity of care is still continuing. You do the easiest things first, and then you grow from there, and then you do the slightly harder things, and then you grow from there. So neurosurgery and open heart surgery are still coming online and not quite there yet. But they have four statutory missions with this hospital. One is patient care, another is education, and a third is research. And they are teamed up with both LSU and Tulane medical schools and their researchers. And with Tulane scientists, they recently have had some groundbreaking research on an opioid alternative. So it's a pain-killing drug that really sees the same results in terms of it killing the pain, but without the addictive qualities. So it's as strong as heroin, but not addictive.
Wow. That can be huge.
So if that goes, that's huge. They've got about 25 researchers working with a few million dollars in grants for that research. They also are a national partner in emergency readiness. There are 200 beds in the hospital that could be made into 400 beds. It's 200 private room beds. They sit above ground. They have facilities where they could operate without city power or water for 5 days. So as we are in hurricane season, they are a place where people could receive care if need be in the event of an emergency. It's the only hospital. You have to go all the way to Houston or Atlanta to find another VA hospital that is partnered with one or more medical schools. So we are a referral hospital. They're referring VA patients in from Alexandria, Shreveport, Biloxi, and Jackson hospitals get referred here. 45,000 or more veterans in this region actively enroll in this kind of care. But they also have teamed with the other local hospitals so that if Ochsner does it better or has better facility, or if Tulane does, they send them out and they work together. It's not the old system where you're stuck in the VA or you're stuck here. There's a lot more merging of care.
Well, if they're not up and running with heart care yet, that'd be something I guess opposite could do. Yeah.
But do they have ambulatory clinics?
They do.
And
They do.
Is there an urgent care that's associated with them, do you know, or is it just their emergency room?
No, there is daily medical. There also 500 medical students this year received training there, as well as nursing students, pharmacy students. I'm just talking about the doctors. 600 will next year, and 70% of the United States medical students, I learned today, rotate through some sort of VA training.
So
70%
so this
get it
vision of this massive biomedical corridor and a biomedical
looks like it's
is
working.
It's
continuing to
developing.
progress.
Absolutely.
So there might be more housing cropping up in the mid-city area to fill that need.
You know, you drive down Tulane, it's a totally different look.
Oh,
than
yeah,
it was
brand new
6 years ago,
restaurants,
that's for
brand new
sure.
housing. Everywhere you
Yeah,
look, there's
everything.
something new over there.
All right, Dave, we're going to jump back over to you. And about deadly force, the NOPD, they sent out a statement about that.
New Orleans police this year say they have 4 times shot suspects. And that is, to some critics, an alarming increase. The police acknowledge it as a spike in the use of deadly force. But they insist, and the police chief put out a statement this week saying each case taken individually shows that it was absolutely the only choice those officers had to make, making split-second decisions in those circumstances. It started on January 4th, where a suicidal man was reportedly carrying a gun. Police go to the scene. He fired at them. They shot and killed him.
Suicide by cop.
Yeah, suicide by cop. February 17th, Canal Street. Officers go to arrest a man who is wanted. As they move in to arrest him, they say he immediately pulls out a gun and starts shooting. He then flees, and there's a shootout that goes from Canal to Tulane, down Elk Place. 5 bystanders are wounded. The suspect is ultimately shot and killed. On May 17th, so February 17th, May 17th, on Park Brittany Boulevard, got a call of a man walking down the street with a gun. Seems to be another suicide by cop situation. As soon as police arrive, he starts shooting at them. They return fire and kill him. And then, most recently, June 17th, oddly, 3 of these were on the 17th of the
Watch out
month.
on July 17th.
Yeah, on Britannia Street, they shoot 2 men who allegedly had zip-tied employees at the CVS, robbed the drugstore, came out and started shooting at police.
All these on body cam?
They are. And we have seen the body cams from the first 3 incidents. We have not yet from the Britannia Street incident. And the FBI has been involved, the independent police monitor has been involved, and there are other mechanisms that kick in as a result of the consent decree. And NOPD says they've complied with all of those, and thus far no one has raised any red flags to indicate that police were not justified in these shootings, but the investigation continues.
So do they describe in this statement, because I have not seen it, but really, what is their protocol now? What is their strategy now?
They didn't get that detailed. The chief was just more saying, when you take each case individually, that these were clear-cut cases where deadly force was the only option. Now, critics will say that police could have approached the situations differently, so they didn't put themselves in a position where they were faced with having to use deadly force. Some have criticized the attempted arrest of this wanted violent suspect on Canal Street, saying instead of 2 officers just running up and trying to get him, there may have been a more coordinated strategy with a larger group of officers coming in to make the arrest while they just continued to monitor him. But the police say he was too dangerous. They didn't want to risk that. They wanted to immediately put him under arrest. They didn't know he was armed at the time, but they knew he potentially was. So the questions will continue, but the police chief says, hey, when we're faced with people shooting at us, we are going to shoot back. And he says in each of these cases, the suspects fired first.
And that Elks Place shooting, I mean, the video of that was all over. We saw that repeated. It was really quite dramatic to watch that video
having 5
too.
bystanders wounded.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario. The police sign up for this, and they know the risk. These were just 5 people who were just standing on the street, waiting for a bus, actually, who then end up getting shot in an exchange of gunfire. We still haven't seen the final report from NOPD, but they had indicated that at least 3 of the suspects were probably shot by police bullets.
All right, Dave, thanks a lot. I'm going to go over to Errol now, and something more pleasant. There was a good time for a lot of folks last night on Fulton Place.
It was unbelievable. It was a great night for the franchise, because since we got the franchise,
Pelicans we're talking about,
the original Hornets franchise, people have liked it, but it's always been a little bit of a hard sell. And during the time we've had the franchise, there have been 3 rookies who were drafted. They caused a lot of excitement, and this is the person of the future. And the first 2 had never quite worked out. One was Chris Paul, and the other was Anthony Davis. They had their they had their good years here, but they wound up leaving because they wanted to be with a winner. Now we've got Zion Williamson, because everybody's heard about it. I will say this. Go look at some of the videos on YouTube or something. This guy's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. I mean,
40-inch vertical leap.
Yeah. He flies across the court. I mean, it's like watching a 747 landing. I mean, just coming in and then stuffing the ball. And so he's going to be just a lot of fun to watch. But to me, the real story last night, and because everybody knew he was going to be drafted, was what happened on Fulton Street. There were thousands of people, and they were giving out red T-shirts, and we know with the number 1 on it, and there was a chance, and they were. And they were going, who that, and so the who that thing has moved over to the Saints. What just made me think about is that Yeah, it moved from the Saints to the Pelicans. But Fulton, last week we were talking about this being the 35th anniversary of the World's Fair. And Fulton Street was something that was started to be developed. It was an old street, it was an old commercial street. And because of the World's Fair, you saw the beginning of shops and restaurants. And tonight, 35 years later, last night was, I think, one of its big moments.
The real fulfillment of it.
Yeah, and this showed the New Orleans and the evolution of New Orleans. And in a town where a lot of activity goes on down, you go to a lot of cities, and you go downtown, there's not much going on at night. But to see what was happening last night and all the people, and it was a young crowd that was out there, I just thought it was very encouraging. And if these people are excited about the basketball team, and if that brings more support, all the better.
We hope they all bought season tickets, because that's what's needed too. Just get
Season
folks in
tickets
the
is
seats.
you got to take out a loan for that. But you can get Upper Bowl tickets.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see some good basketball.
You can get tickets for the games too, just for individual games.
But the way they've developed the area around the Superdome and the Smoothie King Center with the restaurants and things, that seeing that scene develop, it's just really good.
Well, that was another vision, is to increase that activity along Floyd Street, and a lot of people didn't think it would happen. They were very skeptical about the arena, but it's doing its job.
And it was a long time happening, but yeah, it is.
The big question now is going to be, is Zion Williamson enough with the other 2 first-round picks they got and the veterans they're keeping? Can they win immediately? Because it's always winning is the answer to everything.
Griffin last night
We've got
said,
this-
don't expect that.
We're going to believe it. We're going to believe.
We got a spike in interest now, but they got to win to maintain that.
Think positive. Okay, quickly, looking ahead.
Right. The New Orleans Police Department during the month of June, June has traditionally been Gay Pride Month. Now they just call it Pride Month. But they've developed a special badge that some officers can be wearing, reflecting the colors of the whole Gay Pride movement. So that's kind of a
We'll see how many of those we see around. All right, thanks, Dave.
After what was a period where we didn't see a whole lot of new hotels coming online in New Orleans, now suddenly the just hotels, more are on the way. It's coming to fruition. Four Seasons and the Convention Center Hotel, the 2 biggies, but more are popping up everywhere. And we're going to see just what the limit will be and how many the city can support.
All right, Don.
Back to Zion Williamson. He is here now. It was chatter. Now he's here, and he will be out and about in the community. In fact, he has an event tomorrow afternoon in New Orleans East
Look at it.
at a basketball court.
Jessica.
In just 2 short weeks, stay tuned for the launch of the combined New Orleans Advocate and Times-Picayune.
July
Exciting
1st.
times, July
It is
1st.
July 1, huh?
Yes.
Okay, we'll be looking for it. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.